Right, so here we are, coping with change. So hello and welcome. This is a two-part series, so obviously this is part one, and it can be taken individually or together. It is helpful to get both parts in, just so you can kind of get that well-rounded understanding of it. So I'll just start with, my name is Samantha Nickerson. I am a licensed counseling therapist, and I work with Breelove Counselling in partnership with the Canadian Mental Health Association. So we've developed these webinars as a team, and we're excited to be able to offer this to the community, as well as begin to transition into the next phase of our experiences with the pandemic, uncertain times, kind of what things are going to look like right now, where we might be hitting that second wave. So first, we're going to start with providing you some background on what we do here at Breelove Counselling. Maybe if I can get my PowerPoint to work here. All right. So Breelove Counselling was established in 2012. Using a trauma-informed approach, we operate an integrative practice focused on community and private partnerships. So our specialty ranges from general mental health, art therapy, adversities, trauma, to nutritional psychology for individuals aged 18 and older. So our focus is to help individuals build resilience and heal. We achieve this by exploring opportunities for wellness and empowerment, non-judgmental listening, and customized treatment plans. So our focus is also a central part of our commitment to working with first responders, including healthcare workers, in bringing in awareness and practice of vicarious resilience to help manage vicarious trauma and building trauma-informed organizations. So Breelove Counselling contributes to the efforts of a resilient community. Since 2012, we have focused on services that support and empower wellness, awareness, and resilience. So our community contribution is through our practicum placement program, so the community counseling program, in partnership with the Canadian Mental Health Association of New Brunswick at the Moncton office. So this program offers free counseling therapy for those in need by appointment, including our counseling clinic that's currently taking place on Wednesdays. So of course, right now, all of that is happening virtually, and to set up an appointment with the counseling clinic, you would contact at the Canadian Mental Health Association office in Moncton. So what to kind of expect from this webinar? So what are we going to learn? In today's society, many people find themselves living through multiple, extensive, and often debilitating changes in their lives. So we are all among those people who are affected by these changes. So change manifests itself in many facets of our life. So because of the constant changes in daily life, people face perpetually increasing levels of stress. So taking the recent events between the pandemic, the increase in cases right now, to our continuous exposure to racial inequities, some of us may also experience traumatic stress responses. So although change has always been a part of our lives of human beings, the present rate of change is increasing exponentially. It is the speed of change that increases the stress in people's life. So we need to be clear that change is not going to stop, and therefore people must develop skills to manage that stress carefully. So coping with change will explore the different types of change. Change management, ways to cope with that change, and your attitude about change. Everyone adapts to change differently. The important tactic for each individual is to master the basic skills that are critical to move through that change easily and effectively. So most importantly, to learn what types of change impact you the most, what your change management skills are, how you cope with your change, and your attitude about change. So those are the basic skills that we're kind of talking about. So we're going to work through together through some self-assessments, activities, and learn about coping with all forms of change. So before we kind of get into the actual webinar, we are going to explore a couple of coping techniques here. So the first one, as you can see, is the deep breathing exercises. So with deep breathing, it's very common. People, when they hear that deep breathing is a coping technique, they're like, oh, well, yeah, that makes sense. As you can see here, it's just defined a relaxation technique performed by purposely taking low, deep breaths. And then when you practice it regularly, it can provide both an immediate and long-term relief from stress and anxiety. So you can see kind of here how it works. And it's basically to induce that relaxation response. This is the recommended way to do deep breathing. So you inhale it through your nose for about 4 seconds. You're going to then hold your breath for those 4 seconds, and then you're going to exhale that breath for 6 seconds, if that makes sense. So we're going to try that right now. So we recommend there, just a second here, sorry. Might be having some troubles with the PowerPoint. So just to kind of go over the inhaling, exhaling, just while I make sure I've got everything on the go here. You're going to inhale through your nose for 4 seconds, so it might look funny, but I'm going to try it and kind of show you guys here. So you're inhaling. And then you exhale through your mouth. So they recommend the 6 seconds here. And sorry, technical difficulties. Let's make sure you can actually see the deep breathing sheet that I'm referring to. So hopefully everybody can see that now. Okay, perfect. If you guys haven't noticed, this is my first time using the Zoom presentation. So just bear with me. So this is the deep breathing technique here that I was talking about. So I'll just kind of scroll back up just so you can see the definition and how that breathing works. And this is where I'm talking about, they're saying inhale that breath, hold that breath, and exhale for the 6 seconds. That can be extremely hard to exhale that breath for 6 seconds. If you can get it for at least the 4, then that's still going to help with getting into that practice of the deep breathing. So they recommend practicing for at least 2 minutes to really get the full effect of it. And obviously it says preferably 5 to 10. More times than not, you're going to see that decrease in stress within the first 2 minutes of practicing it. Right, and then the second kind of coping technique here is the grounding techniques. So your grounding techniques are going to help you focus in the moment and turn the attention away from those stress-inducing thoughts, excessive thoughts of worry, memories, things that may invoke a panic attack or an anxiety attack. So in other words, grounding techniques are also a mindfulness approach. So the first one, which is a personal favorite of mine, is the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 technique. So as you can see, it uses the senses. So this is, what are 5 things that you can see, and describe them to yourself. So, in my background here, I've got a pink mirror, so that's one thing I see. I have a cup that's beside me, also pink. What are 4 things you can feel? Well, can you really zone in on that, on what you're sitting on? Can you feel what you're sitting on? Picking up an object and examining its weight, texture, other physical qualities. So TV remote, paying attention to the buttons. What are 3 things that you hear? So can you hear birds chirping? Can you hear the TV on? Can you hear the hum of the electronics? What are 2 things that you can smell? And hopefully they're all good things. And 1 thing you can taste. So they say carry gum, candy, or small snacks for this step. I recommend practicing this during a time that you're eating a meal, because you can really focus on what you see, things that you feel, so noticing the texture of the food. Things you hear, again, you can kind of work with your surroundings. Things you can smell, can you smell the different flavors? And, again, what you can taste. And if you're eating a meal, then you're noticing all the different tastes that there are. So now we're going to go back to the PowerPoint and get into it here. All right. So we've gone through the grounding techniques, so that way we're kind of ready. And I wanted to introduce those first because sometimes even the littlest things can invoke a stress response. And so it's important that individuals know that this can be used at any moment during this webinar. If you need to take a break, do some deep breathing, by all means do that. If you have water with you or something that you can drink, that also helps to slow the breath. So we're just gonna kind of jump right into it. So types of change. People experience changes in their personal lives, at home or at work. In fact, in any aspect of life. A little bit of change can usually be managed. So, however, it's imperative to identify the aspect in your life in which you're experiencing a great deal of change. This can help to better identify the pace and or the severity of change that may be overwhelming you and what direction to begin focusing on. So let's take a few minutes to answer the types of change scale. So in your handouts that you would have received, you would have gotten one that kind of looks like this, your types of change scale, which I realize is backwards on the screen. And if you haven't already, we're going to take a few minutes. It provides a description of the types of change, but we're also going to go through them. Place a check in each of the boxes that describe changes that you have recently experienced or are currently experiencing. And it's important to remember there's no right or wrong answers. So don't spend too much time thinking about your answers. Your initial response will be what's most true to you. And in case for whatever reason you guys don't have that up there, I do have it readily here. So this is the kind of first page, and I'll leave this on for a couple of minutes. And then I'll go to the second page just so you can kind of jot down what you're feeling in terms of the changes that you're experiencing. Now, some of you might be experiencing either more or less changes than others and different changes. Again, it's important to note that there is no right or wrong answer. And when you've checked off everything in those two categories, make sure to put your total checks, just kind of as an idea. And I'm going to go ahead and scroll down into the second page. And just leave it up there for one more minute, and then we'll kind of get to what that means. Okay. So as you can see here on the screen, and I do apologize if there was a few of you who weren't done, but just it shows you in general terms what your scores mean. So they have low, moderate, high. As you can see, if you scored low, so 0 to 6 in the individual scales, not all together, you're experiencing low amount of change. If you notice in the medium that you now have scored a moderate amount of change, and high, you're experiencing a great deal of change. Pretty self-explanatory. So what does that mean? It's a normal aspect of everyone's life. It's important to identify those aspects of your life in which you are experiencing those major changes. So as mentioned previously, there is the global change that we're all inevitably experiencing from one spectrum to another in the transition of a pandemic, current pandemic to post-pandemic. So we need to find ways in becoming more aware of the impact of these changes on us. So, looking at your total scores for each scale, so work, personal, relationship, financial, and we're going to explore these types of changes a little bit further. Now, because I kind of emphasize that there's no right or wrong answer, these low, moderate, high scores are not the end-all be-all. It's just to give you an idea of kind of where you're at in life and where you're at with changes. So as previously mentioned, there's different types of changes that those scales represented. So there's work. So that may include layoff or a loss of job, a change in position or supervisor, new technology or responsibilities, job searching, coworker difficulties, reduction in salary, etc. Now this is a change that probably majority of individuals are experiencing right now because of everything that's going on. And then the second type of change is your personal change. So illness, mental, physical, or learning disabilities, eating habits, belief systems, loss, social life, your relationships. So that's your changes may include a breakup, birth or loss of child, marriage, health of family member, in-laws, blended family, empty nest, then finally financial. So these changes may include debt, financial loss, new mortgage, overspending, theft, inability to retire, legal problems, decrease in salary. Chances are 90% of the population has experienced one, if not more, changes in each of these categories, both pre-pandemic, during pandemic, and can't overly say post-pandemic, but we are adjusting to a new normal. So it's important to remember that even though change can be difficult, it's also necessary and a part of life. Learning to cope with the change effectively can therefore help enhance resiliency and a sense of empowerment. So in the face of those challenges. Everyone experiences a wide range of thoughts and emotions to some degree when we're faced with these changes and transitions. It's also important to remember that these thoughts, emotions, and physical sensations will not last. So working through the stages and the experiences is necessary for effective coping. Change can also be managed using tools and strategies to that help people work through their thoughts. So those grounding techniques that I mentioned, if, thinking of a type of change got you extremely overwhelmed, maybe it's a relationship problem or a loss of job, just working through that immediate stress reduction can be beneficial to then see the kind of bigger picture. So it's important to remember that although individuals have largely no control over changes that occur throughout their life, I often tell individuals that you can only control yourself and how you feel about a situation, how you process the situation. So you have the ability to take the responsibility for how you respond to them. So you have the power to choose what you would like to think, feel, and do as a result. And oftentimes, stages of change can often be very similar to the 5 stages of grief. Stage 1 is your shock. Stage 2, anger. Stage 3 is bargaining. Stage 4 is depression. And stage 5 is acceptance. So when you go through that change, you experience all those feelings. So this is based largely off of the stages of grief module. And it's been used to help people understand that loss and grief, because that is what a change can be. It is a loss in your everyday life, and you do grieve over that part of your life. It also helps people to better understand the reactions and responses to significant life changes. So the first stage is typically, as you can see there, the shock. So it's often short-lived, may include a drop in productivity, difficulty making decisions, and feeling temporarily slowed down. Behind this shock may be a lack of information, fear of the unknown, or fear of doing something wrong. Denial will often set in after the initial shock as the individual's thoughts begin focusing on the past and wondering why there needs to be that change. So longing for the comfort of status quo, feeling threatened, questioning self-worth, confusion, and fear of failure are common experiences in this stage of shock and denial. So the first stage can be particularly challenging for anyone who hasn't gone through a significant change in their life already, or when it's unexpected, because you don't see it coming. That's why they consider it a shock, and a lot of the times it runs into self-blame. So it leads you right into the second stage of anger. And it may not be the outburst anger that you may think of. It could be anger itself, frustration, irritation, annoyance. So it's common for people to look for an outside source to blame and direct their anger towards. And this is because there's not an understanding of why that change is happening, why it has to happen, and not overly comfortable. So the outward focused anger can be considered a continuation of denial by offering another focus to project fears and anxieties that are associated with that change. So once the anger, suspicion, frustration, and blame have been expressed towards outside sources, it is then typically typical to see anger turn inwards. And just because they say in this section it starts outwardly blaming and then directed inward, it can be the other way as well. And you can move throughout these stages of change. You can be anger and then go to stage 4 right away, and it's depression feeling. And then bounce to bargaining, up to acceptance, and come back. There's no one right way of the stages, and that's why it can also be complicated to work through them. So once the second stage of anger passes, then you're looking at stage 3, so bargaining. An individual is often calculated and reflective, so may attempt to influence outside sources or higher powers by negotiating and bargaining for the chance of the change to not occur. In an effort to hold on to or create a sense of normalcy, and as the attempts of compromising fail, individuals begin to ask, what can be done now? So what can we do? And try to determine the options that remain. This stage includes wishing that things could be different, a shift in focus onto future possibilities that are available. This can create a false sense of hope, as individuals may be influenced by desperation, fear, or guilt. Once the reality kind of begins to set in and that there's limited options that are present, we then hit stage 4, which is depression. So earlier stages are most likely past or future oriented. Depression is a here and now emotion and may look like apathy, isolation, numbness, and withdrawal. While the change has been acknowledged, individuals may begin to experience increasing weakness, discomfort, personal deterioration. They may feel a sense of meaningless, self-doubt, lethargy, guilt, and unworthiness, and the belief that nobody cares what happens to them. When this stage becomes overwhelming to face, people may not feel like talking and experience feelings of isolation and hopelessness. And then finally, with a little help and understanding, you can get to the final stage, which is the acceptance. So this occurs when emotions begin to stabilize and the individual is able to acknowledge that change is inevitable and can be overcome. It is characterized by more realistic thinking around the situation and a focus on the new realities that can take place in light of change. You know the saying, when one door closes, another one opens. So while the change may not be a positive one, the individual begins to realize that there will be both good and bad days, and that's more helpful and adaptive to work with the change rather than attempt to fight it or resist it. Negative emotions have been felt and can now let go as individuals begin to move on with their lives and accept their new normal. So I did ask for another handout to be sent out to you guys, and this is kind of reflecting on the stages of change, in which I will open it up again on mine, just for whatever reason you don't have it. So right here, again, it goes through another detailed memo of the stages of change. So then there are these 3 questions. What change are you currently going through? What stage are you experiencing? Have already experienced? And what stage are you in now? So I'll just give you guys a moment to reflect on those questions. And in the next couple of slides, we actually are going to revisit them as well. All right. So, working through these stages. So as you can see there, we've got a little quote. Be not afraid of changing slowly, be afraid of standing still. So the more we resist, the more it persists. Moving through change requires a willingness to feel and express our emotions, as opposed to avoiding, numbing, or trying to escape them in another way. Approaching them with curiosity instead of judgment is important in order to not compound the often already difficult or distressing emotions. Getting curious means asking yourself questions like, what am I feeling right now? How intense is this feeling? What prompted me to feel this way? And reflecting on your responses non-judgmentally. Focusing on negative emotions and thoughts and filtering out the positive is common when people are going through change. It's very easy for us to focus on the negatives and even focus on ourselves negatively. It can be just as important to intentionally look for examples or moments of joy and gratitude. So what makes you most joyful? Who brings you happiness? What are you grateful for? And how can you enjoy your life more? Our emotions are tied to our thoughts, and they inform each other in ways that can either help us move forward or keep us stuck. When being faced with change, it is often common that people's thoughts and imaginations can run wild, which may end up looking like the what if game. In the what if game, you keep trying to find the reason for the change and wondering if you could have done something differently to have the change avoided. Just like how it's helpful to face our emotions head on, it can also be helpful to get curious with these types of thoughts as well. When looking at your what if thought, ask yourself the following questions. Would it have helped the situation? Would it have made a difference? And is this realistic thinking? Now, it's important to remember when you're looking at the what if game is to acknowledge that the what if is also another version of hindsight bias, and that you did the best you could in the moment with what you knew, and can you control that change? So accepting the change and the thoughts and emotions that accompany change is essential for being able to cope effectively. Emotions can range from peace and relief to anger or loneliness. It's easy to become stuck in negative feelings, especially in response to major or multiple changes. This may look like loss of interest in activities, feeling ill, being tired or having trouble sleeping, avoiding daily tasks, feeling irritable, arguing with others. Sharing our feelings can be one way of working through them, in addition to paying attention to and recognizing our triggers, and also letting go of feelings using a variety of healthy strategies, like getting enough sleep, journaling, going for a walk, dancing, starting a new hobby, learning not to blame yourself, engaging in creativity, meeting up with friends. So things that you enjoy doing, that you find peace in, and kind of can help center you. So just like with emotions, we can also get stuck in negative and unhelpful thinking patterns. Many people struggle to accept change in their lives because of the fear of what lies ahead. When paired with negative emotions, these fortune-telling thoughts often cloud our perception of what could be. Ruminating on the past is also common, so when experiencing change. In order to move through change, it's important to adopt more balanced thoughts by saying goodbye to any unfinished business, releasing any blame, and focusing on the future opportunities that may open up as a result of that change. So again, I'd asked you to reflect on 3 specific questions. So let's kind of go over them. What changes are you currently going through? If you feel comfortable and you want to type it out or share it in the chat, you certainly can, or you can share it to me privately in the chat, and I can certainly read it out loud. There might be individuals who are experiencing similar changes to what you're experiencing. I'm just going to stop the screen share there so I don't miss anything. So is there anyone who would like to share about some of the changes that you're currently going through, whether, I mean, you don't have to be specific, it can be just a category, so work, personal, relationships, or financial. Okay, so we do have an individual who's experiencing some work changes. I'm sure there's probably a few of you who are. I can easily say that myself, that I'm experiencing a work change. I mean, I'm working out of a home office rather than in front of everybody. Is there anyone who's experiencing personal changes? Wonderful. Well, not wonderful for the changes, but thank you for sharing. And what about relationship changes? Is anyone experiencing any of those or have been experiencing those recently? And what about financial changes? Is anybody experiencing any of those recently? Perfect. Is anyone comfortable with sharing experiences or even in here? Or rather, actually, let's kind of move on and go, what stages have you already experienced? So in terms of the stage 1 shock, stage 2 anger, stage 3 bargaining, 4 depression, and 5 acceptance. Is anybody comfortable in identifying in what stage they're at or what stage they've experienced? So some people have found themselves at acceptance, which is great. And it's important too that even if you bounce back from acceptance, that final stage, that's okay. Change is kind of like a roller coaster of life, unfortunately. And what stages would you guys say you're in right now, given the changes that you're experiencing? Or does anyone want to share any thoughts and emotions that you're experiencing as a result of change? Again, it can be sent to me privately in the webinar chat, or it can be shared amongst everybody. You know, if I'm speaking from experience, when the pandemic first started, I certainly experienced a lot of confusion, some anger, frustration. And even now, with everything that's going on, I think I'm back to some confusion and frustration, even mixed in with the acceptance. we'll move along and kind of continue forward. So we are now going to look at the what if, also in handouts that were given. So I'll just scroll down here. The what if game. So this is what I had previously kind of spoken about earlier, and I think it's important that you're able to reflect on this even after the webinar. So what is that change that you want to identify, and what if? So what are the what ifs? Well, what if COVID didn't happen? What if, whatever the case is, would it have helped the situation? Would it have made a difference? Is it realistic thinking? Believe it or not, 9 times out of 10, you'll probably find that it's not realistic thinking, and that's only because you make the best you can with what you know in the decisions that you make. So you make it with the information that you have. And oftentimes it's only after the event that more information will come to light. So we'll just pop back here. So again there, when people find themselves going through the changes, they often allow their imagination to run wild. They find themselves playing the what if game. So basically just kind of what I discussed there. We try to find the reason for change. Try to see if there's any way that we could have affected that change or have stopped it from happening. Now, let's take a moment and reflect on some of the what ifs we had said to ourselves the last time we experienced change. So it could be, what if I decided to go to this place instead of this place? What if I went back to school instead of working wherever it is I currently work? What if I approached an argument in a different way? And then kind of some final thoughts on change, just with regards to this section. So people going through changes often need to allow themselves to experience what they're feeling. It may be uncomfortable, but let it happen. So these feelings may be positive feelings like peace, joy, and relief. On the other hand, it could be negative feelings like sadness, anger, loneliness. The ones that really we strive to kind of put inside a box. We don't have to feel it. Identify what change you are going through or may be going through. Identify your feelings about this change, regardless whether they're good or bad, and understanding what seems to trigger these intense emotions can help pinpoint what might be helpful in sharing with someone who you care about. So remember that not everybody is ready or able to be a trusted listener. And choosing those you trust or people whom you feel comfortable and safe with is key. So when experiencing change, especially major change or multiple changes, it's easy to get stuck in negative feelings and have difficulty overcoming them. Listening to your body, whether it be thoughts, sensations, or emotions, can help you determine if you are getting stuck in your feelings. So being honest with yourself around the fear of what lies ahead, lies ahead in our lives can be daunting. Giving yourself permission to explore this part of change can help work through the change in a helpful way. So identify that change. Be honest around your fears about the change and look for people who you can talk to and give yourself permission to find those helpful solutions that can help you work through and cope with your fear about that change. So remember that all change involves a loss of some sort. We need to accept that loss in order to move on into the tomorrow. So accepting it today so you can move forward tomorrow. Writing or talking about major changes and what you feel you're losing from this change can be helpful into putting those things into perspective. What's been the most negative thing about this change? What's been the most positive? And most importantly, what does your new normal look like? So just as I quickly flip back here, I did want to make sure you had also some kind of ideas on how you can let go of your feelings in a healthy manner. Because sometimes it can be hard to even think of what we could do in certain situations. So one step is monitoring your self-thoughts. So in times of change, you have that constant dialogue going on in your head. And this kind of goes back to the what if. So, you know, thought number one, what's your thoughts in your head? What emotions are these thoughts leading to? What's the result of these negative emotions and how can you stop them? And then the second page here, let go of those feelings in a healthy way. So you've identified the thoughts that are in your head, you're identifying the negative emotions that these thoughts are leading to, and what is the result of them. Here are some ones that maybe you didn't think about beforehand. Artwork, knitting, watching a comedy, organizing, meditating, join a support group, clean, house project, hike, volunteer at a food kitchen, cry if you feel like it. Allow those tears. Shift your focus. Some of these, you know, we can't do, like go to a concert or attend a play, but you know, there are a lot of virtual things happening, so allow yourself, even if it's sitting in front of a screen, if that's going to help kind of these feelings lessen. Doing yard work, sleeping, making sure you get enough sleep is extremely crucial in terms of adjusting with those feelings. And then we're going to hit into the second part of this week's seminar. And then at the end, if there's any questions, I can certainly take those. So change management. So this here we have another scale, and just like the first one, in terms of your totals, it's basic knowledge that it provides. Don't take it as an end-all be-all. And in case you don't have it printed out, we'll just go right to it on this screen here. So change management scale. And with regards to this one, it is, you know, read these statements to yourself. 3 equals very, 2 equals somewhat, and 1 equals not at all. And then we'll look at how these kind of, what these mean. So if you just want to take a second, we'll start with that first one. so what do these scores mean? Again, you have your interpretation, which is low, moderate to high. Scoring low means you don't usually cope with changes well. That would be scores of 6 to 9, and that would be, again, per each category there. Moderate, they consider 10 to 14, which you're able to sometimes cope, sometimes not. And then 15 to 18, which is high, in which, you most often cope successfully with changes associated with transitioning in your life. So, what does that all mean? Well, right here is where we get it. So, the first section looked at perceiving and responding to transitions. Second one, developing and utilizing internal and external support systems. The third section looked at reducing emotional and physical distress. And the final one dealt with planning and implementing those change. So effective change management refers to the strength of your ability to cope with those changes in your life. So being able to perceive and respond to your transitions, develop and utilize internal and external support systems, reduce emotional and physical distress, and plan and implement change can help an individual manage change more productively. So if we look at the first one, which is perceiving and responding to transitions, the way you perceive your change is very important. People who possess high levels of perceiving and responding to change have a sense of self-control and self-esteem so that potential changes are not regarded as overwhelming. These individuals are able to respond effectively to the initial shock or threat involved with a transition. They can describe the threat accurately, recognize the roles of their feelings in their understanding of the situation, and withhold impulsive or passive responses. This indicates their specific type of coping style. Second part, so developing and utilizing internal and external support systems. People with higher levels of this skill are able to identify their emotional needs in addition to being able to identify this, in addition to be able to identify the individuals to include in their support network and take the steps to reach out to them. So people who score high in this category will also use internal supportive self-talk to help encourage themselves through that transition. So, it's going to be okay, I can get through this. By becoming aware of their limited and unhelpful and or those negative thoughts that leads to feelings of frustration or anger. They're able to challenge them and adopt new, more adaptive thoughts. So these individuals are also able to visualize themselves as they would like to and be able to move forward from that aspect. Reducing emotional and physical distress. So transitions are often associated with stressful events. People who are able to effectively reduce their emotional and physical distress are those who are able to identify those warning signs and symptoms of distress and respond to it in helpful ways. So this would be using those coping techniques and those grounding techniques that we talked about earlier, so that they don't have kind of this tsunami wave of emotions that come over them and kind of engulf them and have a difficulty coming out on top. And then finally, planning and implementing the change. So those who score high in this category are able to respond to change constructively. So planning the change requires active decision-making during times of change. These individuals may still experience feelings of hesitation, uncertainty, or anxiety about their decisions, but they're able to think rationally and realistic about the situation in order to make their choices and put the actions in place. So this then leads to the coping styles. So there's optimist, idealist, realist, and analyst. So change and transition is difficult for everyone. So how people cope with change is more unique and may look different from person to person, depending on their coping style. And there's no real right or wrong way. People have their own way of doing things, and that's why they, have all these categories. So the optimist, very action-oriented and great at multitasking. So these individuals are not afraid to take risks, embrace uncertainty. They want to move on quickly from the change and try to make it into an opportunity for growth. The idealist is very sensitive to the needs of other people, also affected by the change. So they're excellent team players and enjoy cooperative tasks and projects. These individuals are considered the peacemakers, seeking harmony and inclusiveness, and have advanced and creative interpersonal communication skills. Realists are those that respect authority, rules, roles, and policies related to the change. These individuals are very reliable, practical, prepared, and efficient in completing tasks and approaching change. They understand priorities and stick to them and are interested in seeing immediate results regarding moving on from change. And the analyst is future-oriented and is capable of envisioning the steps required to achieve a new goal. These people are careful planners, exploring all aspects of a problem before deciding on which path to take. Unsurprisingly, they take a very systematic approach to change. They are dedicated workers who will persist until problems associated with the change are resolved. These individuals are logical, analytical, and deductive problem solvers. So which coping style would you say best describes you? So does anyone want to share which one kind of resonates with them the most? If I had to guess for myself, I would say realist. I'm just gonna stop the share here for a second. If anyone is comfortable actually saying it, I can certainly unmute you. And is there a style that's least likely to describe you out of optimist, idealist, realist, or analyst? We had some that said realist is what they kind of associate with. From a personal standpoint, I don't know which one would least describe me. I just know that I think I'd associate myself most with a realist. So there's also, if you might be having a difficult time in deciding which one is most likely kind of associated with you, I do have, again, another question mark or sheet here. So this here just kind of looks at, place a check mark in each box that describes you. And maybe there is, a 50-50 split between others. Okay, so moving forward from that, let's look at the change process. So now we kind of understand in terms of our coping style, so optimist, idealist, realist, analyst. So let's look at those components of the change process. So the process of change requires, first and foremost, a willingness to explore the new possibilities and seek support, both internal and external, when needed. Involved in this process is also the ability to express both negative and positive emotions regarding change, including discussing fears and anxieties, as well as aspirations and desire to change. All right, so just got a question here to see if a copy can be hinted out of each slide, deep breathing and grounding, and the changes. I will look into that further. That I'm not 100% sure, but you should have the deep breathing exercises and grounding techniques amongst the handouts that were given. And if those weren't given, I can certainly make sure that that gets emailed to you. And I'll just make a note of that so I'll have that and find out from someone for you. Okay, so looking at how moving forward through the transition will shift the way you see yourself, others, and the world. The change process also involves ability to reevaluate the impact of change on your social and physical environments. So in the negative impacts of not moving forward, lastly, the ability to believe in oneself that you're capable of managing the change is another critical element to the change process. So this is why positive self-talk is important, not only to combat that negativity, but to help increase one's sense of confidence, and motivation. Positive self-talk may sound like, I will do my best. Feeling reasonably anxious is okay. I accept the things I cannot control, or it's okay to ask for help. So ask yourself the following questions and answer honestly. What's the worst thing that could happen? What will you lose? What might you gain? What do you have control over? What do you not have control over? And how can you make the change smoother? What are the possibilities for growth? So just take a moment and just kind of let those simmer and see if those resonate there towards you. So for those of you who did not get handouts, I'm just looking to see if I can access email lists so that can be emailed out to you guys so that you'll have them and can use them for reference. Okay, so it's common for individuals to exaggerate the severity of change by only focusing on the negative aspects and imagining only the most unfavorable outcomes. Exploring the worst case scenario by asking that first question, what is the worst thing that could happen, can help challenge this way of thinking about the change by holding up a magnifying glass to some of the unrealistic or distorted thoughts that are being influenced by a focus on negativity. So when we look at the very worst thing that could happen, it's often not the most likely thing to happen. So exploring some of the more probable outcomes is helpful for thinking more realistically about the change and to be able to create a plan of action for ensuring the worst does not happen and to determine the steps to take if, by chance, the worst does happen. So if we cut back here for a second. So this is the change process. So it looks at your latest change. So what's the worst thing that could happen? I will lose blank because of this change. I might gain because of this change. This is affecting my relationship with. I can plan blank to make the change smoother. I need to decide. I can control. I cannot control, and the possibilities of growth. So just let's take a moment and just kind of reflect on those statements and questions and see if they apply to you. Okay, so we're just gonna flip back. Oh, I'm getting a little ahead of myself here. All right, so just kind of before we finish up the presentation and then I'll be able to answer any questions, let's take a look at the values and strengths because that's gonna play an important role in the change process. So when going through the stages of change and trying to manage them, it's important to remain true to your values. Your values are the things that you believe are most important. They help to determine your priorities in life and can help with decision-making when it comes to working through the stages of change. Values also help to give direction and in determining what goals will look like. So it's possible that you aren't living the values you would intentionally choose. Making this personal choice provides the opportunity to bring your values to a conscious level and make the changes you desire to lead a fulfilled life. So these values, they're broad, unique, enduring, and align with your true self. So some examples include love, respect, creativity, wisdom, freedom, humor, family, and safety. Exploring values can be done in a number of ways. So sometimes it can involve looking at the values of those around you and considering where you stand in relation to them. What are the values of your parents or caretakers? What are the values of someone you admire? What are society's values? Another way of helping to determine your core values is by completing the following statements and then answering why to your chosen responses. The person I love very much is, and why? The person from history I admire most is, and why? The work I value most, I am at my best when, what I most want in life is, the proudest moment was, my passion is, what did you choose your specific responses? Or why did you choose your specific responses? What could this exercise say about you and your values? Were they positive values? Were they negative values? Why were those what you decided? And finally, strengths. So determining your strengths are equally important as determining your core values. Buckingham and Clifton define character strengths as a combination of talents, naturally recurring patterns of thoughts, feeling, and behavior, knowledge, facts and lessons learned, and skills, the steps of an activity. The qualities help people to function well and are able to be put into practice in order to help cope with change. So strengths may include communicating, empathizing, troubleshooting, love of learning, leading, resilience, and more. So what are some of your personal strengths that could be beneficial for managing change? What are some of your strengths that you would like to tend to and improve on? it's important to remember that even a weakness is a strength. So that essentially is going to wrap up the first portion of Coping with Change webinar series. Is there any questions that individuals might have? I understand that some may not have received the handouts, so that is something that I am working on to kind of see how we can solve that problem. And so you can ask questions in the Q&A section that's just below your screen by participants, or if you want to go ahead and ask in the Zoom webinar. And I've just got confirmation too that they will be sent out immediately to the email list. They aren't sure what happened, but it will get there. And then for those of you who have signed up for part 2, you should also receive those handouts prior to the seminar as well. And I will check with my colleague to make sure she checks at the beginning of the seminar to make sure everybody's got that situated. And if there's no other questions, you guys are free to go. I'm going to stick around there just for a few more minutes just in case.